Then, only 5 minutes down the road,
Oh my God, we just stopped. We just reversed. In Belgium, there's thousands and thousands of weapons. We just saw loads of weapons everywhere, of shells everywhere we went. And then we just do flicks like that.
we hadn't really made any effort at all. There were shells lying on the side of the road and they weren't hard to find. Could these shells have been part of a chemical weapons fight that happened almost 90 years ago?
This is day one already. This is not even in the heart of it all. The Somme's that way down there, isn't it?
Yet more shells out here, unattended, unsupervised, and potentially weapons of mass destruction. People say that the chemicals that they used do not deteriorate and are just as deadly today. Could one of these shells contain a liquid chemical agent? Could it contain some of the most deadly substances known to man? Why were they lying on the side of the road? We felt like we were getting closer to the truth about weapons of mass destruction. With all these bombs getting around, lying on the side of the road, we thought it would be imperative to have a look at the history of World War I and perhaps cover some of the ground that the Ministry of Defence did not. Some of this ground, we believe, is the history and remembrance of the soldiers and what they went through. Through our act of remembrance and learning the history, we hope to discover the truth about weapons of mass destruction. During the First Great War between 1914 and 1918, soldiers lined up in a complex system of trenches which were defended, attacked and counter-defended. The human cost for the British Empire and Dominion forces at the end of the war was around 1 million deaths, which included 724,407 deaths and 270,407 missing presumed dead, which were later added to the official war total. Other allies suffered as well, with the French dead estimated to be 1.39 million, the Austro-Hungarians 1.2 million, 1.7 million Russians and 1.85 million Germans. The use of armoury was an industrialised scale never before seen. With factories geared for mass production, the supply of arms to the battlefields was staggering, and according to Allied Ministry of Defence munition statistics published after the war, between the 1st of August 1914 until the 11th of November 1918, 25,430 large calibre guns have been manufactured. Also, 239,850 machine guns have been made. It's also reported that 162 million shells were supplied to the Allied effort on the battlefields of the Western Front, and the arms industry had employed some 3.2 million employees. No better place represents the industrialised carnage which occurred than here at the battlefields of the Somme. In the lead up to the Allied advance, a barrage of some 1.773 million shells were fired by the Allies in the hope of crushing the German lines and cutting a hole in the complex and extensive barbed wire system of defences. It was reported at the time this barrage could be heard in central London. Then, on the 1st of July 1915, wave after wave of young men went over the top. The result was nearly 60,000 British Empire casualties on the first day. And during the entirety of the battle, estimates were 420,000 British Empire forces, 203,000 French, and about 437,500 Germans in the entire area of the Somme battles. As you can see before us, are some of those casualties. Even seeing this amount is just huge, but is only a small drop in relation to the thousands of graves that are littering the landscape here around the Somme. The next part of our journey takes us further north into Belgium, into Flanders fields in the Ypres area. This is our first day in the Ypres area, and we found the same phenomenon as we did on the battlefields of France, and that is unexploded shells. And this one's lying on the side of the road, and we've been able to spend quite a bit of time with it. So it seems that all along wherever there were battles, they're still digging up unexploded weapons. Which was the use of shells fired from a variety of cannons that the official war histories reported that between the 26th of May 1917 and the 6th of June 1917, during the bombardment of the Messines area, the Allies reported using a massive 3,561,530 shells at a total cost of £17.5 million. These shells were fired during a period of just 12 days, limited within a small locality. The Allies lost some 150,000 men at Arras and 400,000 in Passchendaele. The concentration of shell fire along the front line on this small patch of ground running between the coast of Belgium through France to the Swiss border changed the landscape into a churned up muddy quagmire. It is said that this mud was so bad that many troops died from it, drowning in it. Unable to free themselves, they sank into it, and there is said to be almost 50,000 Allied servicemen with no known grave who still lie in the Ypres landscape. Another consequence of the softened up ground was that shells would consistently land and would not explode. Some estimates were that 1 in 3 did not explode and remain in the Belgium landscape. With each square metre of battlefield shelled approximately 10 times, that means that each square metre of Belgium soil statistically holds 3 unexploded shells. Four. Does anyone want to go and get my ball? Huh? Yeah. As an example, here in Beauzine, during 1976 to 78, along this 8-kilometre stretch of new motorway being built, 81 tonnes of unexploded shells were unearthed. It is said that 20% of all shells fired during World War I were a chemical weapon. Overall, between 1975 to 1978, the Belgian Army collected 665 tonnes of unexploded high explosive shells and 105 tonnes of gas shells in the Ypres and Demant area.
And it's these gas shells that we've come to learn about. Our road journey was about chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. There was evidence of the war everywhere. We found this chemical container, we saw shells on the side of the road, and we felt like we were getting closer to the truth about weapons of mass destruction. We're now going to look at the history of the greatest chemical weapons fight that ever occurred. The true horror of a chemical weapons attack was part of everyday life in the trenches, which both sides of the Great War would have felt. If it wasn't bad enough being entrenched in mud with soul-destroying explosions that could tear you to pieces or vaporise you in an instant, there was the silent menace of a chemical weapons attack. The blind panic which would engulf soldiers who appeared to be drowning in the open air. Unable to breathe with burning lungs full of toxic chemicals, the effects were often not noticed until well after exposure. Often, unable to breathe, victims in a panic would remove their gas mask in an attempt to get air into their lungs, only to be further exposed.